ethics, morality. You have good outcomes by lying. The end result is all that matters. Like glue society together, you kind of need to have some little white lies and deceptions and happy lies, good lies, let lie to help their ego. The art of war is deception, right? Everyone's pissed that you're telling the truth right to their face. People fucking hate that. To be able to dissent, might is right. Break the rules to justify and get what we want, or justifying everything, right? Everybody's justifying burning things down, right? Riots, self-righteous riots, just causes, right? It's clearly Machiavellian. People that fear you are forced to respect you. So much bad being done in the name of good, surely misguided. Whatever, it's all just entertainment, right? We're here for the entertainment, right? That's what we came for. It's just a big cafe of madness. Welcome back. So I suppose we'll jump right into the first topic. I've been thinking about this one for a while, kind of ins and outs, and what do you identify yourself as? It's one of these type of topics. Ethics, morality, right? Politics has totally been sucked up in ethics and morality so much, which probably sparks a lot of the outrage and stuff like that. But I think ethically, you kind of have to think, philosophy of ethics. It's like there's deontological thinking, which is what you're doing is right, and that it holds moral value, and so you do the right thing, even if that could potentially lead to bad outcomes. Then there's consequentialism, which is more of the end result is all that matters, regardless of what actions were taken. So, a good example of this is that, if there's a deranged killer, right? Killing is wrong. There's a deranged killer that is going to kill like a group of people, that you would stop them, right? And you might have to kill them to stop them. So you are, right? Your end result is good. You prevented all that from happening, but your action was bad if you're killing. So there's a couple good movie scenes that come to mind that demonstrate this dichotomy between these two types of ethical thinking. And one of them's Good Will Hunting, right? So Will's at the NSA and he's interviewing for a job, and the director says to him, so the question isn't why should you work for the NSA, but why shouldn't you? And he says, why shouldn't I work for the NSA? That's a tough one, but I'll take a shot. Say I'm working at the NSA. Somebody puts a code on my desk, something nobody else can break. Maybe I take a shot at it, maybe I break it. And I'm real happy with myself too, because I did my job well. But maybe that code was the location of some rebel army in North Africa or the Middle East. Once they have that location, they bomb the village where the rebels are hiding. There's 1,500 people I never met, never had a problem with, they get killed. Now the politicians are saying, send in the Marines to secure the area, because they don't give a shit. It won't be their kid over there getting shot. Just like it wasn't their number when their number got called, because they were over there pulling a tour on the National Guard. It'd be some kid from Southie taking shrapnel in the ass, and he comes back to find the plant that he used to work for just got exported to the country he just got back from. And the guy who put the shrapnel in his ass got his old job, because he'll do the work for 15 cents a day and no bathroom breaks. Meanwhile, he realized the only reason he was over there in the first place was so he could help install a government that would sell us oil at good prices. And of course, the oil companies, they used the skirmish over there to scare up some domestic oil prices. Cute little ancillary to benefit them, but it ain't helping my buddy at $2.50 a gallon. And they're taking their sweet time bringing the oil back, of course. And maybe even take the liberty of hiring some alcoholic skipper who likes to drink martinis and play slalom with the icebergs. And it ain't too long till he hits one, spills the oil, kills all the sea life in the North Atlantic. So now my buddy's out of work, he can't afford to drive, so he's walking to job interviews, which sucks because the shrapnel in his ass is giving him chronic hemorrhoids. Meanwhile, he's starving, because every time he goes to get a bite to eat, the only blue plate special they're serving is North Atlantic scrod in the Quaker state. So what do I think? I'm holding out for something better. I figure, fuck it, why don't I just shoot my buddy, take his job, give it to his own sworn worst enemy, hike up gas prices, bomb a village, club a baby seal, hit the hash pipe, and join the National Guard. I could be elected president. Jesus, just reciting that's hard enough. It's harder than it looks. It's a good example of utilitarian thinking. Another good example of this type of thinking is the movie The Imitation Game. It's a story about Alan Turing, who's often thought of the grandfather of AI. And they're trying to break the Enigma code, and they do. and when they break it, they can read German communications. And so they're listening to the communications, and when they hear that there's going to be a big bombing raid it's going to kill tons of people, they're excited. We're going to stop this. We got to relay this message. But then they have to think forward, and they think if there's a big, massive movement, it'll be evident that they broke the code, and the Germans are going to change their whole code. So they have to keep it secret and not tell anyone. So there's lots of instances where it's real complex, that, there's principled thinking, deontological thinking, and then there's consequentialist thinking, where the ends justify the means, and sometimes the means ain't pretty. I feel like deontological philosophy or ethics is more straightforward and truthful. I say truthful specifically because it is like straightforward, it is principled. Whereas consequentialism definitely opens up this, can of worms of now it's, justified to lie, right? To have good outcomes by lying and deception. And it's like, I think, everybody at some level, probably more of a primitive level, is utilitarian, right? Which is a form of consequentialism. So it's like, I think a lot of people innately are like that. Everybody kind of has like an innate part of you that it wants to do that. It's Machiavellian. Ends justifies the means, right? And so, we do things. We skirt the rules. We work outside the lines. We break the rules to justify and get what we want, or get what we think is good. There's also a psychological tendency to justify things after the fact. So I think we have to be aware of our tendency to do that. I kind of bumped into the subject a little bit on a podcast, or it was an audiobook. Tim Ferriss, he writes some good stuff. Tim Ferriss has a book called Tribe of Mentors, and it's just a whole bunch of celebrities, people, important people, and what they do and this and that. And actually, somebody I really like was in it, Liv Bory. So, I like her. I'm a fan of her. So, but now I'm about to criticize her. But yeah, she kind of said, that she's a firm believer in like consequentialism, and like that if you know the outcomes are so much more important than the actual actions and what you're doing. And I found that really interesting coming from a poker player. Like in poker, I would say you have to be more principled, right? You'd have to, like if you've got a 2 and a 4, and you go all in, like, you could win. And if you do win, does that justify what you did? And it's kind of like, well, if you did that every time, then you're going to lose. Like, it worked in that one time. But like that player is going to be worse off in the long run after making moves like that. Like, that's not principled, right? But the end justified the mean in that case, and the person won. So that means playing a 2-4 is good. Like, I think it becomes a little shady once you get into consequentialism. And I think, I dug at the root of that for like a little bit. And it was kind of like, I think it's in the knowing. Because you think the ends justifies the means. If you know the outcome, then you can justify the means. Lying, killing, stealing, all these things, right? Burning things down, right? Riots, self-righteous riots, But if you know the outcome, you can justify it. Or if it's a very plausible outcome, like, you can justify some of these things. But we don't know, and I think that's the thing is like, with like the trolley dilemma and stuff like that, like maybe you would know in that case, but if it's like much more convoluted case, you might not know the outcome. And so you're kind of like, that's where I think you have to rest on your laurels, your morals, like, like the tried and true, like do what is principled, and hopefully good things come out of it if you are doing good things, but that's not always the case. But I think you still like rest your hat on that because you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you can lock down a lot of possibilities, but you still don't know. And like, without knowing what's going to happen, it's hard to justify the actions. And you kind of think if you have a set goal, that's your intended goal. But if you're adding up a whole bunch of bad things in order to get something good to happen, add up a bunch of bad things could likely add up to something bad. Whereas, doing good things can have bad outcomes, but you'd rather be adding up a bunch of good things. You would think that they would tend to be a better outcome. Another cleaver of society as well is two types of thinking, where it's like, if a strategy is going poorly and not working well and it's failing, to pour more resources into it to fix it, to do better, right? Rather than let it fail, and put resources into strategies that are performing well and are working. Governments are notorious for this. Rather than cutting budget to pour efficiency areas, they pour more money in, justify your budget higher. Companies that do this fail. So I think a lot of people can get caught up in that stuff. And I think that's where, I mean, our world, I find that to be this line between deontological thinking and consequentialist thinking, utilitarianism, as a very large cleaver of society, of people that fall on these different sides of it. It's really interesting to navigate and analyze. And like I said, I think, the conscious mind, the superego, is like the deontological aspect of you're learning principles of what is good, to do this good, do that, right? And it's like, those are principled things, maybe from tradition or learned behavior or whatever. But from the maybe subconscious part of the mind, it's a little bit more consequentialist, to kind of improvise, and you have a set goal and you're trying to manipulate the system to get to that said goal. I think it's in pursuit of something and justify all the things on the way. And it's interesting because it's like, I mean, it's Machiavellian, right? It's clearly Machiavellian. The ends justify the means, Machiavelli was like famous for saying, it's like, it's better to be feared than to be loved, right? And it's kind of like, why? And it's like, if he was seeking power, right, in a power position, it's better to be feared. And he said that, like, people that fear you, like, are forced to respect you. People that love you, like, they can act on certain ways. They don't have to, right? They're not being forced to. It's their own liking or not liking of you. But if they feel fearful from you, then they have no choice there. You're in control. But yeah, I mean, Machiavellian thinking is typically thought of as negative, right? You know what I mean? Like, the ends justifies the means. I think there's lots of, ethicists in philosophy that would say that that's bad thinking. It leads to bad behaviors or bad things happening, right? Like, and it leads to bad outcomes because you don't know what is going to be the outcome, and then you're justifying bad actions along the way. So it is kind of interesting to analyze, like, so much bad being done in the name of good, and it's like the good outcome doesn't even come out, so it's just a whole bunch of bad things, bad outcome and bad things intended to be good. I mean, the road to hell is paved in good intentions, right? But that's like at the root of it, utilitarian, consequentialist thinking, so I think, and it's everywhere. I think it's in a lot of this, like, like diversity and inclusion type stuff. It's like, all these good intentions, and we want good outcomes. We want the equality to be the outcome, right? And it's like, so then we're justifying doing all these, like, strange things of skewing resources and how people are treated, and a lot of, like, strange means to justify an ends, right? And I think that's where I think what we've seen from the data coming out of this stuff, that it is more divisive than it is inclusive. So it's kind of interesting to start to see is, it's not getting the ends that people wanted in the first place, right? It had a set goal and it's not reaching that goal. So then the actions aren't necessarily justified. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said there. Agree or disagree. I don't fully disagree with, all the diversity and equity stuff, but I think it's surely misguided. With utilitarianism and consequentialism, you get a lot of, right, like, deceptions, right? Because it's ends to justify the means, and I think you get kind of naturally, you're getting lies and deceptions, right, to get the desired outcome. Like, maybe, like with COVID and all that stuff, it was like kind of lying a little bit about the like the masks, about the N95 masks, like, lying to be like, that's not the mask, like, just the regular cloth masks are the ones that'll do, because they didn't want to crush the supply chain, right? So, like, they were kind of right, like, well, if everybody goes out and hoards, there's lots of hoarding going on at that time, right? Toilet paper was being hoarded, and it's like, they didn't want that happening, people stashing up those N95 masks and then kind of crippling the supply chain that they needed them at the hospitals. So they kind of lied, right? Sort of saying that these, like, surgical masks could help, and it was kind of like, it became this whole big mess because it was like, because you're lying, but you're operating in an industry of trust. Like, what you say needs to be trusted. So it's strange, and that's where it's a lot of times you need to, like, rest on your, like, principled things. Don't lie, right? Like, even if the outcome is going to potentially be bad, you should be careful of what you say, but don't lie. You get into very strange situations like that, and that's, an ends to justify a means, but that's what ends up happening. Then you get bad outcomes too, because you had bad things, right? So if you do lots of good things, you could hope that they translate into something good. It doesn't always, but just like it definitely didn't come from a lab. That's a dangerous conspiracy theory. I mean, I started saying about deception. There's lots of deception in it, and I think, I said in another episode, the art of war is deception, right? That's, if it had to be boiled down, ancient Chinese text, the art of war, it's all about deception and information, intel, right, and deception. And, I think that's where I see like the world, like, our speech, a lot of speech metaphorically is war, right? We have like a lot of metaphors for, striking down certain points. And there's lots of metaphors for war in the language. And you if you pay attention, try to find it, like you'll see. I don't want to like try to explain that all right now, but there's lots of deception in our, right? Like just in natural everyday occurrences, just all over, like throughout society, like lots of deception everywhere. Truth is encrypted in lies and deceit. And I think that's part of the ecosystem. That's the way like the world works, like is everyone's trying to kind of like, carve their own path. And a lot of the way of carving your own path is to kind of set up the pieces the way you want them. And sometimes you have to kind of stretch the truth and lie or deceive and whatever. And a lot of it is harmless. Like a lot of it is just harmless stuff, right? But it's like the world's covered in lies and deceptions, little white lies and happy lies and deceptions. And, they're all interwoven, and some you don't know, some you do. And it's not just lies, too. It's euphemisms, we can use euphemisms not to hurt people's feelings, to cushion the blow. But we start to distort and dull and dilute the meaning oftentimes. I often think that a world full of euphemisms is a world full of lies. It seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that women tend to lean a little bit more consequentialist or utilitarian. Right? There's lots of these, lots of women kind of like bounding together to for these just causes, right? And then they kind of like are doing some of these things that I don't know. I'm making a pretty vast generalization, but I think I'm trying to build into a point of it's interesting to think like women, I think, are evolved actually to deceive better. Like they're more evolved than men to deceive. From evolutionary standpoint, they are community builders and trying to get people to work together. And I think there's always going to be some type of turmoil or whatever to like glue society together. You kind of need to have some little white lies and deceptions, and it's all in good intentions. It's like I said, happy lies, good lies, like to kind of glue it all together. And I think also too, being the smaller, weaker sex, that right, they had to be more attuned to deception to carve their path to have power in society, right? And women have plenty of power in society. I think that's where, are they in like the supreme executive, chair? Maybe not, but the people that influence those people have lots of power. There's a great verse from the Tao Te Ching that is about how all rivers flow to the sea and how the sea has humility and it rules from below. And I think that is an important lesson, that power comes from everywhere. It doesn't just come from brute force or the executive position. And it can come from below. And again, like these metaphors, like I was saying before, below is seen as lesser or something. And it's not necessarily. Below can be good, depending on how you look at it. And just think how much of the world is motivated by sex in the pursuit of women. Helen of Troy being a good example. And it's not just a male-female thing, too. This type of thinking happens at the conglomerated systemic level. That's where it really becomes complicated, and it's systems thinking, trying to kind of keep everything together, and you're trying to justify the means, right? So there's lots of intricate workings that you get complicated, sometimes ugly means. And so it's like any position, right, is it's all a group of people. Usually there's one figurehead, but who are the people that influence that figurehead? And everyone's, there's plenty of women in these workings. But it's interesting to see, like, right, just to lean back more deontological, right, to rest on your principles even when other people are going to say you're wrong, and you firmly think that this is the right, morally right, moral high ground. You need to be strong. You need to be able to stand up because you might be outnumbered, right? And so I think that's where males are more evolved towards to be able to dissent, right? Or to have that moral code to stand up on something that's principled. And I don't think it's exclusively a male-female thing. There's alpha female as well, and there's alpha male, beta, everything. So I think that to be able to dissent, it does take force, or it takes some type of physical or mental fortitude, some type of strength at a different level. And maybe I'm reaching a little here, but it is interesting. I do tend to notice, like the example I use with Liv Bowery. I find it interesting. I do seem to find a lot of women do seem to lean consequentialist, utilitarian ethics. And it's not to say that it's bad. Like that's, I think it can lead to bad and weird, strange places, very convoluted places that are hard to figure out because, like I said, there's lots of actions being justified on things that are not known because we never know. We have very good, estimations of what we think is going to happen, but no one ever knows exactly what the future is. So you get lots of very tricky and deceptive things happening in pursuit of those goals. Whereas from a deontological aspect, it's a lot more straightforward. Like things are more cut and dry. Of what you're doing, you don't lie. You're telling the truth, and everyone fucking hates the truth. I mean, everyone's pissed that you're telling the truth right to their face. People fucking hate that. And, you have to have stature. Might is right to be able to even do that, to tell people something they might not want to hear, right? The truth. Rather than lie to, help their ego. So, maybe I'm kind of rambling and reaching a little bit on some of those, or taking liberties with some of those subjects, but I'd love to hear other people's opinion on it. But yeah, I definitely see that society is cleaved pretty strongly along those, these subjects of deontological and consequentialist ethics. But yeah, it's strange too, is like the whole, election cycle and, just social media in general. It's always looking at the demographics. Everything's demographics, right? And it's like, I don't know, it just seems like demographics and measuring things by demographics is like racist just by definition. But yet everyone's like totally cool with doing that stuff for the election cycle, trying to identify who's going to vote where. This group is voting this way and this group is voting that way. And it's kind of like the individual is just like lost and it doesn't exist when it comes to like some of these things, to try to look at the macro, environment of ideology. And yeah, same thing with social media. That's all doing the same thing, right? Trying to identify demographics and all these things. It's definitely got some racist undertones to it. And I mean, have you seen commercials lately? But again, it's, ends justify the means type stuff. They're kind of identifying certain demographics and then trying to talk that way to that demographic, and just trying to promote a message to that demographic. And, yeah, I mean, there's lots of racist undertones, but it's just interesting to see how the whole system works. I mean, everybody's got their ends and their means, and they're all justifying everything, right? Everybody's justifying. But yeah, I mean, just enjoy the ride, I guess.